What happens when the child you take is the one child you should never touch? In the restless city of Lumumba, where night never truly sleeps and danger hides behind tinted windows, a quiet secret lived inside a small 8th-floor apartment. A secret no one was supposed to uncover. A secret protected for 8 long years. Grace knew her son wasn't ordinary. She knew the world outside was too loud, too dangerous, too political. And every morning, when she held him close before school, a question echoed in her heart. What if today is the day everything unravels? And then, it happened. Even she didn't notice. A child who never made it to class. A phone call that melted the ground beneath her feet. But what the kidnappers didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined, was that the little boy they snatched wasn't just a child. He was a ticking bomb of truth, power, and identity. This isn't just a story about a kidnapping. It's a story about secrets that can topple governments. About a mother who lived in fear of the past catching up. And about the moment 2 criminals realized they hadn't taken a hostage. They had taken the governor's hidden son. And when the truth finally surfaced, it shook the entire city of Lumumba. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Morning in Lagos. Evening in London. Midnight in Nairobi. Drop your location in the comments, hit like, and subscribe to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every truth leaves a mark. Now, lean in. Because the moment the kidnappers grabbed Daniel, their fate was already sealed. The city of Lumumba was always awake. Even before dawn, the hum of motorcycles, the soft murmur of early traders, and the glow of scattered streetlights painted a restless picture. In a small but tidy apartment on the 8th floor of Riverview Towers, Grace watched her only son through a half-open bedroom door. Daniel, 8 years old and bright-eyed, was still asleep, hugging his school bag like a pillow. Grace smiled, but the smile never reached her eyes. Too many things weighed on her heart: the debt she was fighting to clear, the promotion she feared she wouldn't get, and the shadow of something unspoken, something about Daniel's past that only she and one other person on earth knew. As she watched him, a strange chill crawled across her skin. She couldn't explain it, but something felt off. Like the city had inhaled but forgotten how to exhale. That morning moved quietly. Daniel joked about the pigeons outside the window, and Grace rushed him through breakfast before escorting him to school, keeping a hand on his shoulder every second. She didn't know why, but her instincts were restless, like drums beating in her chest. At the school gate, Daniel turned and hugged her longer than usual. "Mommy," he whispered, pressing his cheek against her stomach, "you're squeezing too hard." Grace laughed nervously, releasing him. Go, before you're late." She watched him run off, unaware that a dark-tinted van was parked across the street, engine off, windows cracked, 2 men inside watching the boy with cold, patient eyes. By midday, the storm hit. Grace was in the middle of a staff briefing when her phone buzzed, once, twice, 10 times. She stepped out, irritated, and answered. What she heard made her knees buckle. The school said Daniel never made it to class. Grace felt the word tilt sharply. Her lungs tightened. She grabbed her bag, ran out of the office, and begged the taxi driver to step on the accelerator. As they cut through Lumumba's traffic, Grace kept whispering, "No, no, no." She wasn't just afraid for her son, she was afraid of the secret. The one she had guarded for 8 years. The one she prayed no stranger would ever discover. And as the traffic swallowed her cries, somewhere in an abandoned warehouse on the city's outskirts, Daniel sat on a wooden stool, hands tied, quietly staring at the kidnappers who had no idea they had just taken the wrong child. And by nightfall, the first crack in their confidence would appear. The warehouse smelled of rust and burning oil. The kidnappers, Richard, the short-tempered leader, and Jonas, the quieter one, expected screaming, tears, panic. Instead, Daniel simply sat there, calm but alert, watching everything with unsettling understanding. "You're not scared?" Jonas asked, frowning. Daniel shook his head. "My mom told me fear makes you blind." The men exchanged glances. Children weren't supposed to talk like that. They began the usual routine, recording a ransom video, forcing him to speak into the camera, but Daniel refused to cry. Instead, he asked, "Do you know who you took?" Richard growled and slapped the table. "A child. That's all." Daniel lowered his gaze. "No. That's not all." But he didn't say more. Back in the city, Grace sat in a dim room inside the police headquarters, face pale, voice shaking as she finally revealed the truth. Daniel wasn't just her son, he was the biological child of David Mackey, the newly elected governor whose enemies were many and merciless. David had fathered Daniel with Grace 8 years before, long before he imagined rising to power. To protect the child from political wolves, they agreed to keep his identity hidden until he was older. No press, no photos online, no public appearances. Only a handful of people even knew the truth. "If his enemies find out," Grace said, voice breaking, "they won't ask for money. They'll use him to destroy David." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't a normal kidnapping. This was a time bomb. Meanwhile, tensions in the warehouse grew thicker. Jonas began noticing details: Daniel's polished English, the branded school uniform, the expensive wristband he wore. "Richard," he whispered, "this boy is not ordinary." But Richard brushed it off, convinced that every child was worth money to frighten parents. When they finally called Grace with the ransom demand, her trembling voice made the kidnappers pause. Not because she sounded afraid, but because her fear carried weight, like someone used to guarding something precious. Daniel watched them silently, eyes sharp, heart steady. He knew this moment was coming. He had heard his mother whisper warnings, had seen how she hid him away from cameras, how she never let him talk to strangers. The secret was cracking open, and the kidnappers were walking straight into its fire. But the real storm wouldn't hit until dawn. Morning light crept through the warehouse cracks, illuminating Daniel like a soft spotlight. Jonas hadn't slept. He kept staring at the boy, replaying everything he said and didn't say. When Daniel finally whispered, "You should let me go," Jonas felt a chill. "Tell me why?" he asked softly. Daniel hesitated, then told him the truth. "My father is Governor David Mackey." Jonas froze. Richard didn't believe it until he searched Daniel's wristband, a custom-made medical tracker used only by high-profile families. The color drained from his face. They hadn't kidnapped a child, they had kidnapped the governor's hidden son. And the entire city was already looking for him. Outside, the sound of helicopters began to thrum. Police vans surrounded the area. Grace stood among them, arms folded tightly across her chest, praying her child was alive. David Mackey himself arrived minutes later, guarded by security. His face was carved with guilt. "This is my fault," he whispered. Grace didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the warehouse door, refusing to blink. Inside, Richard paced frantically, calculating his chances of escape. Jonas stepped in front of him. "Enough," he said. "We release the boy." Richard shoved him aside, gripping his gun. "We are dead men if we open that door." Jonas met his eyes, tired, broken, but resolute. "We are dead men either way. But one death is honorable." Daniel watched the argument with quiet tears gathering in his eyes. The door finally creaked open. Jonas stepped out first, hands raised high. Behind him, Daniel walked slowly toward the light. The moment Grace saw him, her legs gave way. She ran, faster than she ever had in her life, and fell to her knees, pulling Daniel into her arms. His small arms wrapped around her neck as though he never wanted to let go. Cameras flashed. Police surged forward. But all Grace heard was her son whispering, "I knew you'd come." Behind them, Jonas knelt and surrendered. Richard tried to escape through a side exit but was quickly cornered. David watched silently, shame and relief mixing behind his eyes. When Grace finally stood, Daniel took her hand tightly. "Is it over?" he asked. Grace wiped his tears. "Yes, my son. It's over." As they walked away, the morning sun settled gently over the city of Lumumba, like a final blessing. In the end, the kidnappers didn't just steal a child. They awakened a truth that could no longer remain hidden. Daniel walked out of that warehouse not as a victim, but as a revelation. A living secret finally stepping into the light. Grace's worst fear came true, yet somehow it brought her peace. No more hiding. No more shadows. The world finally knew who her son truly was. And in that truth, he became safer than he had ever been in the dark. Jonas found redemption in surrender. Richard found consequences in his greed. And David Mackey, the governor who once buried his past, was forced to face the child he could no longer pretend didn't exist. But the greatest moment belonged to Daniel, the little boy who looked danger in the eyes and walked out unbroken. Grace held her son close, the sunrise washing over them like a promise. A promise that secrets may fall apart, but families can still rise from the pieces. And if this story teaches us anything, it's this: some secrets don't destroy us. They free us. Now it's your turn. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments. What moment hit you the hardest? Like, share, and subscribe to Stories by the King, where powerful African stories come alive. And every ending carries a lesson worth remembering.